Welcome back to more Warhammer lore. In today's episode we will be going over the Nehekaran Pantheon of Khemri, the people who are known now as the Tomb Kings. Now before we get into the lore of the Khemrian gods, it is important to note that some of the gods only have minor lore blurbs, and unfortunately, much like some of the Elven Pantheon, were not really elaborated upon, other than that they exist and what they ultimately represent. You will definitely see the Egyptian influence of the Tomb Kings in this video, as many of the deities represent stars and celestial entities and various forms of animals and wildlife. And some of the more powerful and surprisingly, well, probably not so surprisingly, are the underworld deities, and Syrian in particular being the lord of the underworld and the dead. Now, I am also not an expert in Egyptian language, so I will more than likely be butchering some of the pronunciation. Feel free to correct me in the comment section how you believe phonetically that you are supposed to say some of these Egyptian names. So, let's stop wasting time and let's get into the lore proper. Now, all of the information we know about the Tomb Kings is actually compiled from other various races and what we can find out in some of the time of legend novels. So for the most part, most of this information is being told from third parties that are not to quite be experts on the topic, much like the Lizardmen. So some of the particulars of the gods and gods are not completely represented. But historians know the Nehekarans worshipped many gods, most of whom had both human and animal forms. These figures adorn the walls of many tombs and can also be found in many of the surviving Nehekaran texts painted onto papyrus scrolls. Their names and their hierarchy, however, have ultimately been lost. Scholars have guessed at both and have assembled a rough list, but without a living Nehekaran trained in their traditions, there is no way of confirming or correcting any of these minor details. Unfortunately, the risen Tomb Kings are usually not too compliant with the mortals of other races, and the few semi-living beings that were present at the time are either liches or vampires, both of which can neither be trusted or expected to divulge information on the kingdoms of Khemri willingly or otherwise. However, Khemri did have close ties to Cathay even back then, which we do know still exists, but little else is known as they were never really fleshed out as a playable faction and are shrouded in relative mystery. Also, the Khemrians do appear to have had ties with the Lizardmen at some point, and may have learned or at least stole the idea of embalming their dead and building pyramid tombs from the servants of the old ones. And now we come to our first deity in Asaf, the goddess of beauty, magic, and vengeance of ancient Acara. Sometimes Asaf takes the form of an asp, although even under this aspect she is captivating. According to Nehekaran tradition, it was Asaf who persuaded Petra to pity humans and give them a land to dwell in. The veneration of Asaf was great throughout the kingdoms, but nowhere more so than in Lybaris, thus all known as the tomb city of Asaf. Asaf was also the patron of the archers of ancient Nehekara, who carried arrows whose bronze points were forged and blessed in the heart of the sacred temples of the Ass goddess, which gave them an incredible aim and precision to reach their objectives. Currently, the goddess acts on the earth through the mummified body of Queen Khalida of Lybaris. It was Asaf who saved Khalida from becoming a vampire after being mortally wounded by her cousin Neferata and bestowing on her the dark gift against her will. Although she died and was mummified, she was purified of all evil and blessed by Asaf, and ever since, Khalida awakens to fulfill her will. The power of the Ass goddess floods her body with divine energy, infusing life and power to her mummified remains with the drive to defeat her enemies. She was also seen to be the patron goddess of Lamia in what I have learned, the homeland of Neferata, and also Khalida before she was married into the royal family of Lybaris, where she now hails from. The next god is Bast, goddess of cats, grace, and love. She appears as a tall, lithe woman with tawny skin, feather brown hair, and cat green eyes. She can also appear with a cat head or as a large, majestic panther. Unfortunately, Bast is one of the deities in question that does not have much lore, or at least what I could find other than this brief description. Now, much like the Egyptians, cats and other animals were seen as embodiments of their gods, but unlike the Egyptians, there does not appear to be a worship of cats in Kimri to the extent of the actual Egyptians they were made from. In fact, the sacred animals of many gods are not actually worshipped, but often are used in rituals and treated with reverence, but only to an extent. From what I understand, the Kemrians, for example, would not think twice about shooing a cat from their stables if it was upsetting the horses or other beasts, as that would be unthinkable in the Egyptian society that they draw inspiration from. And now we move on to Jajaf, the god of war and death, who appears as a tall, well-muscled man with a jackal's head. He can appear as a large but otherwise normal jackal as well. Many of the Ushapti bear with them the likeness of this mighty deity, with their jackal-like bodies and most notably their heads. Jajaf is obviously based upon the Egyptian god Anubis. In Egyptian lore, Anubis is the lord of mummification and the judge of the dead within the necropolis, weighing the heart of the deceased upon his ancient scales alongside the feather of Mahat or Ma'at. If Mahat outweighed the heart, then the deceased souls were damned for all eternity, never to enter the afterlife. Now, a quick note on the Ushapti. Originally, Ushapti were actually almost like monks. They were actual living people that would get the likeness of whatever deity they were in patronage to. So, the Jaf was mostly a warrior god, and for that reason, most of the Ushapti that you would see back during the time of Kemri would be of this nature. They would have the jackal head. Now, the modern Ushapti of the Tomb Kings are actually not the Ushapti of Kemri, and I will go into more details on this and when I get to my society and my military videos, but just for now, know that they are actually different. The modern Ushapti of the Tomb Kings are actually constructs. They're not living, undead beings in any way. So, just want to make that quick note, and let's move on to the next deity. Geheb is the god of earth and strength in the ancient Pantheon of Acara. He was depicted as a man soaring and incredibly muscular, strong and rugged features, and a thick beard, although sometimes he took the form of a gigantic dog. In general, the animal associated with this deity was the lion, a reason why he is also depicted with lions' heads or similar animals. His Ushapti also have lion heads. The patron god of the city of Kassar, he was a deity most revered by the warriors and soldiers of ancient Acara, for whom the scars of battle and fighting were considered as offerings to him. Geheb's servants and priests used to be tall, sturdy, and muscular looking, and they were considered fearsome warriors. Before the battle, the Nehekarans sacrificed young oxen on the altars of Geheb and poured their blood into bright bronze bowls, which were then passed between the warriors, taking long swallows of the same while begging the god to lend them his strength in combat, which he often did by hardening their skin like that of stone, making them highly resistant to arrows and thrown javelins, as well as glancing seemingly fatal blows from their bodies, with little more than a scratch or a bruise. Some of the most formidable opponents of Nagash were the priest kings of Kassabir, or Kassabir. And the next god is Kassar, the god of the desert. Now, Kassar does not have an animal form, but can appear as the desert wind. He's actually worshipped by more of the nomadic tribesmen on the outskirts of Kemri, mostly seen as bandits to the more civilized nation. And they are possibly the ancestors of what is now Araby, which would explain why the Arabians also have a god of the desert wind that they happen to worship. And unfortunately, that is really all we have on Kassar. And the next, and possibly one of the most important deities, is Petra, the sun god, also called the Great Father, was the most adored of all the divinities of ancient Acara. Petra was the great creator, the first to tread the world. He symbolized eternity and immortality, and was the ruler of the Nehecaran Pantheon and the creator of the human race. Although worshipped through Nehecara, the cities of Kemri and Raestra claimed him as their special patron. He is the only among the Nehecaran gods who did not have an animal form, but always manifested himself as a human being. However, his eyes contained all the stars of the firmament, and a single glance was capable of driving any man mad. Many ancient Nehecaran bas reliefs illustrate Petra driving a golden chariot through the cycle of night and day, chasing forever his beloved Neru, the Nehekaran moon goddess. The ancient priests and acolytes of Petra were characterized by the skin that shined brilliantly in the rays of the sun, and dressed in yellow robes interwoven with gold threads and gold bracelets. On the chest, each carried a polished gold and silver disc of the temple, which was engraved with sacred hieroglyphs and displayed the image of Petra and his burning solar chariot. In this way, Petra's priests used to shine almost like the sun, serving as a mortal reflection of the blessings of the Great Father. The priests of Petra welcomed his arrival at dawn and made sacrifices to the Great Father by sending young slaves to burn to death in large fire pits. A very gruesome ritual, but one that also kept Nagash at bay for many a day. This deity is very reminiscent of a certain old one of the Lizardmen pantheon, and it would not come as a great shock to me to find out that this god actually did create the human race literally, not just what the Cimmerians believe. The god in question is Chotek, the god of the sun, who may have ridden a sky chariot into battle, as some Lizardmen old ones have described, and this is further reinforced by the fact that the Cimmerians also refer to the gods having battled ancient evils in the lands that would be theirs, which one can assume was the forces of chaos. Of course, this is all speculation, but one I feel rather comfortable sharing with you all as it has quite a few connections. And of course, the next deity in question is Neru, which we did briefly mention, but there is not much on her. Other than that, she is the goddess of protection in the moon and is the wife of Petra. That is literally all I could find on her, so let's move on to the next deity. Now, there is no way I'm going to say the next one correctly, but let's give it a try. Pax is the Nehekaran god of the sky and justice, depicted as a muscular man with a hawk's head. He can also appear as a large blue-banded hawk with golden eyes. In either form, his piercing gaze is said to be able to see the sins of the deceased. The rather interesting thing about this god is the fact that there are no references to him being a deity of the underworld, but judging from his description, I would assume he had a similar duty to that of perhaps the Grim Reaper, or maybe even the Valkyries of Norse mythology, sifting through the deceased to deliver them to whatever waited them in the afterlife, or in fact deliver them to a Syrian in this case. Of course, that is also just speculation, but let's move on to Quaff. Is the Nehekaran god of subtlety and snakes, particularly cobras, for it was the form of a Cimmerian cobra that he took within the Great Land prior to the coming of man. Indeed, the god would lie in ambush beneath the surface of the desert before lunging towards his prey and sinking his spear-sized fangs into the scaly throats of lesser snakes. His human form is of a hooded man, but otherwise is more commonly represented by a large king cobra. Now, this deity does sound oddly close to Asaf, but in my opinion it is a completely different god, who represents the more sneaky and patient aspects of snakes. Probably a deity worshipped by assassins or maybe battlefield commanders wishing to catch their enemies unawares. And he also does have quite the resemblance of Sotek, the god of the lizardmen, as he's also depicted as a giant snake being, just a huge gargantuan snake, and we actually get to see him in one of the Warhammer novels, and it is a literal giant snake. It's not him in particular, but it is a representative of him, in the same aspect that the beetles represent certain gods and jackals and so on and so forth. So with that, let's move on to the next deity. Sekhmet was the goddess of the ancient Nehekaran pantheon associated with Morsleb, which is why she was also called the Green Witch. She was the intriguing and vengeful concubine of Petra, the sun god, and is jealous to the love of the Great Father for the human race. She was a very feared deity because she was associated with magic and the dark rites, and with the most terrible creatures and spirits, always ready to cause damage and destruction amongst humans. According to Nehekaran tradition, every time Neru, the moon goddess, came out every night to protect men, the vengeful Sekhmet followed her, gazing grimly at the sons of the gods and intriguing to usurp the post of the beloved wife of Petra. Most nights, Neru triumphed, and her swift feet glided her through the sky, but from time to time, Sekhmet's ruse confused her and the Green Witch usurped Neru's place in the sky. When that happened, the whole region trembled with fear, for the creatures of darkness and the depths of the earth rose and used their evils against humanity. The interesting thing about this deity is that we know that Morsleb is literally made of warpstone, and there is a great eclipse that happens every so many years. Therefore, it is understandable that the people of Khemri would associate this with a dark evil, as when Morsleb is high in the sky, all manner of demons and chaotic beings can manifest themselves more easily in the physical realm. What is also interesting is that one would assume that these demonic incursions happen from time to time, and then through the obvious proof of these abominations, the people of Khemri more than likely invented Sakhamek, which then kept this cycle going for years to come. So, in reality, they created Sahamek for the almost natural phenomenon that is the results of Morsleb. And now we move on to Sokth, which was considered the treacherous god of the scorpions and protector of poisoners, assassins, and thieves. Sokth may appear as a scorpion or as a man with dark skin and black eyes. Although his sacred animals were scorpions of all types, the black-clawed desert scorpions were considered the true sons of Sokth. The dangerous arachnids like to take refuge among the living and to torment them with their frightful stings. The venom of the Nehekharan scorpion could make a person's body stiff as stone as they died in distressed silence, unable to utter a single sound as the paralytic venom slowly made its way to their heart. The scorpion is the form chosen by Sokth. Ancient Nehekharans believed the scorpion would not sting one of Sokth's murderous followers, so those accused of killing another were pushed into a pit of scorpions. If a victim somehow managed to survive his trial by scorpions and drag himself out of the pit, then it was taken as a sign that they were indeed favored by Sokth, and hence guilty of whatever crime they were first tried for. The punishment for which was death by being thrown into a pit of snakes. Those who perished died in agony, as scorpion venom coursed through their veins, but at least they were considered innocent. Though Sokth was considered the protector of thieves, the father of scorpions forbids stealing from the dead, so his legions of black scorpions were used to protect the royal tombs of Nehekhara. Today, the carcasses of these creatures can still be seen among the undead broods of insects and other foul creatures of the desert that comprise the tomb swarms that follow the skeletal legions of the Tomb Kings into battle. Now, we do get a little taste of Khemrian society with this deity, and as with most ancient societies, the methods of crime and punishment are both archaic and almost comical. As with the trial of being punished in a hole filled with scorpions was not bad enough, if you weren't killed immediately, you were then determined to be guilty and then thrown into a pit of snakes to be punished properly for your crime. Very reminiscent of the drowning of a prospective witch to see if they would float or not, which determined guilt or innocence. Either way, the person in question is still dead, and you have to question how many of these people actually did anything at all. Now, I am getting slightly off topic once again, so let's refocus and move on to the next deity. And next we move on to Hoth, the scholar of the gods, patron of knowledge and wisdom. Hoth appears as a slender but fit man with the head of an ibis. He can also appear as an ibis with silver feathers. He's also the patron deity of Liberis, whom were well known for their siege weapons and fonts of knowledge. Now, Liberis has come up a few times at this point, and from the time of Legends novels, Liberis is more focused on Hoth than it would be Asaf, as some of this is contradictory. But I would prefer the Hoth example because, like I said, they had more in common as scholars, at least before Queen Khalida came into power, because she made them a lot more warlike once she became their queen. But before that, they were mostly just scholars, and they were known for making war machines. So there is that. The next god is Ulatep, the god of scavengers. He can appear in the form of a large vulture or as a hunched, scrawny man with a vulture's head. Now, I could not find much on this deity whatsoever. So let's move on to the final and probably the most important deity in the Nehekharan pantheon, other than Petra, of course. Syrian was the sinister, faceless god of the Nehekharan underworld. He is never physically represented, since such a fact would be considered sacrilege, but is continually evoked in Nehekharan funeral rites. He was a very revered god in all of Nehekhara, since with the rise of the mortuary cult, he became as widely worshipped as Petra himself. The Syrian was in charge of guiding all of the souls of the dead, especially the souls of the priest kings on their journey to the beyond, to judge them and to decide if they were worthy to pass to the other life. If he had led a virtuous life, he would be allowed to enter the golden fields of paradise. Otherwise, Syrian would shed the spirit of the howling immensities to the Avern, to suffer there for all eternity, or at least until the funerary priests could return their soul and return it to the land of the living. An exclusive right to those born of noble birth is that it was possible to negotiate and reach a deal with Syrian to reconsider their punishment and mitigate it. Worse punishments ran for those who directly opposed Syrian. It was whispered that those who displeased Syrian were punished in death. Forbidden to enter the golden paradise of the afterlife, they were instead condemned to the lowest depths of the Neverworld, where a hive of Petra beetles would burrow into their immortal bodies and gnaw on their insides for all eternity. The flesh-eating skull-carapaced Petra beetles were believed to be messengers of Syrian. His agents in the mortal world, and through their eyes would Syrian know the sins of all men. His servants in the underworld were the Horaks, terrifying owl-headed warriors charged with guarding and protecting the kingdom of souls. The entrance of the temples of Syrian were flanked by towering basalt statues of these feared guardians. In the kingdom of Khemri, the dead are sacred, and therefore Syrian would indeed be very powerful. In fact, some of his loyal servants would be the mortuary cult, at least they were until the coming of Nagash. But that is a story for another day. And that is all the information I could compile on the Nehekaran Pantheon. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new, or at least entertained your curiosity about the long-forgotten gods of the Tomb Kings. As always, if I have gotten something wrong or you disagree with me, go ahead and leave it down in the comment section for all to see, and I will do my best to answer you and also add the information into one of my future videos, if in fact I missed something. Also, if you are new to the channel, I ask that you like and subscribe to keep up with the channel and also future content, and your contributions really do help quite a bit with the growth and spread of these videos and the content for other people to view. I would also like to say thank you to all of my loyal subscribers and my new ones, as our small community is very supportive, and as long as you are watching, I will continue to make these videos. As always, I have been Jumbo Thick. Thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a good day.